evening, or whatever time of the day it is that whoever is listening to this audio recording video where we got going on here. My name is AHMAN, and my reader tonight is
Malachi.
And this is True Nation Israelite Congregation World History with a little bit of a podcasty type of spin. Tonight we will be talking about the Holy Roman Empire and some of the main points in history and scriptures, that confirm what this time period and what this empire was all about. So, to give a little brief backstop of leading into the Holy Roman Empire, we got to understand from a previous lesson that is going to be brought out dealing with the Byzantine Empire, but we got to understand what this time period was like. So if you did not know, in around 300 AD, after Christ's death, that's when Christianity took over, or was implemented rather, into the Roman Empire as a whole. So this is, again, 300 years after Christ's death, some years after the ministries of Paul that we read about in our scriptures in the New Testament, as well as Peter as well too, and the many disciples that came up after them to establish churches, Christian churches, as far as Israelites, Jews, and Gentiles now converted back to their Hebrew Israelite roots throughout the Roman Empire. And again, the Roman Empire being the most powerful empire in really all of the world at this time, of the known world, the classical world, that we have books and scholars and resources on, in abundance. The Roman Empire was that empire during that time. So again, 300 years after the fact of the matter, there was a man, or rather an emperor named Constantine, that accepted Christianity for himself during this time around 300 AD, and he took it upon himself to make Christianity an official religion within accepted religion within the empire as a whole within Rome. Let's play this video that we have real quick to give you some backdrop real quickly.
The Holy Roman Empire was a large collection of thousands of political entities made up of different ethnicities that existed for more than 1,000 years at the heart of Europe,
and we'll be
stretching from modern-day Italy to Denmark, from France to Poland. The Holy Roman Empire was an important part of European history, with several countries that exist today having emerged from the empire. Keeping in line with the empire's complex nature, there isn't even a universally agreed upon date as to when the empire actually started. The two dates cited are 800 and 962 AD. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century, the Roman Empire was reduced to its eastern half.
Pause the video.
Of course, their capital city was...
So we read right now, or heard, that after the fall of the Western Empire of Rome. So this is just some history that you got to understand. So after Constantine did what he did and brought Christianity as an official recognized religion within the Roman Empire as a total whole, which stretched all the way from Spain, which is by the Atlantic Ocean, into the known territories in the eastern part, which was closer to Alexandria and Egypt, and even touching upon, of course, Israel, because Israel is part of that the empire as well too, as far as paying tribute, and a little bit more beyond. That was the far stretches and outreaches of the Roman Empire. Hopefully we can get you guys an image for you guys to see of that soon enough right now too. So that's as far as, again, the empire as a whole. There was a split though, and that's what we're going into this lesson tonight, as far as the western half. The western half of the Roman Empire developed soon enough, some 100 years later, after Constantine made Christianity an official recognized practice and religion. That's what we're focusing on, is the Holy Roman Empire's side, which was actually the fall of Rome, because you got to understand the geographies when we say these things. Rome itself being a city in the Italian peninsula inhabited the western half of the Roman Empire. The eastern half is what we spoke about in another lesson that's going to get put out, called the Byzantine Empire. That's another detailed to go into in itself that we're not going to really touch too much upon in this particular lesson. But again, the western half of Rome became eventually known as the Holy Roman Empire, and that was from 300 AD. We were given the dates 800. Around 800 AD was when that empire started. So 400 or 500 years after Constantine brought that Christianity back into the empire. You can continue the video.
No longer Rome, it was the ethnically Greek city of Constantinople. Now, while the inhabitants of this empire continue to see themselves as, well, the Roman Empire, modern historians tend to refer to them as the Byzantine Empire, based on the old name for the capital city, Byzantium. Anyway, 3 centuries later, the Frankish king Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans, as the Pope transferred the imperial title from east back to west.
Pause the video. So right there we hear that was the beginning of the emperor aspect of the Holy Roman Empire happening to Rome. So this is what you got to understand that wasn't really explained right now. There were tribes of people, Japhetic people, called the Germanic tribes, people like the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals and such like that. There was a number of reasons why Rome in itself, or the western half of the Roman Empire, fell into what modern historians call the Dark Ages. It was due to the part mainly because of these invasions by these people known as the Goths and the Visigoths and the Vandals, which were indigenous Japhetic peoples of one of his many sons that lived in that area originally. They came in as they call them barbarians, but they came in basically and took over the centralized areas of the Western Roman Empire, and they took them for themselves. And basically they decentralized it as far as dealing with the state. The state dealing with military, dealing with state services like healthcare and helping out, such like that. These Germanic tribes and other tribes from other places, Japhetic people, they came in and basically destroyed all that, everything that is, except for Christianity. Christianity actually maintained itself as far as the structures dealing with that, like the bishops and such like that, and the ministers and everything. Christianity and the churches actually they survived during this period of invasion by the Germanic tribes that came in and took over Rome at this time, the western half. Let me see. Also, part of that, the issue was the churches in general during this time, before the Holy Roman Empire had an actual first emperor, which was Charlemagne, that we're going to get into. The churches had a lot of disagreements between the eastern side, dealing with the Byzantine Empire, and of course the western side, dealing with the seat of Rome and such like that. There was doctrinal issues that was happening between bishops all throughout Rome. So this is when what's called the Council of Nicaea, that the first Council of Nicaea came around 400 AD. Again, a time before the Holy Roman Empire established itself. That's when that happened, because bishops, which were the church leaders all throughout the Roman Empire, had issues with doctrine and understanding. So you can look into the Council of Nicaea sometime yourself, but it was a conglomerate of bishops that came together to kind of work things out. Not everyone agreed, and that was another reason why there was a split in the empire of Rome, was because of, again, invasions on the Western Front and differences in doctrines as far as how to teach Christianity appropriately or properly for the differing bishops on each side of the empire. So, the Byzantine had what they had going on and established the Eastern Orthodox Church, called because it was in the eastern half of the empire, not necessarily anything to do with, Eastern religions, like Buddhism, such like that. It was just the eastern portion of the Roman Empire. And then the Western Empire, they went what was called an Arian Christianity, as far as the man whose name was Arius. That was what his understanding was, and they kept that. So because of those differences, that was one of the main reasons why the empire split into what it became to as the Byzantine, and then now promptly the Holy Roman Empire. Continue the video, please.
The title was considered vacant because it was held by a woman known simply as Irene, who killed her own son to take power from him. The Frankish kingdoms were split and reunited several times, with 3 kingdoms emerging that would make up the core of the Holy Roman Empire: the German kingdom, the Italian kingdom, and the Burgundian kingdom. There was also the kingdom of Bohemia, but that didn't become a kingdom until 1198.
You can pause the video.
In 9...
So we heard right now that the Holy Roman Empire in itself initially was divided. So you got to understand this as well too, before we can understand the video. The Dark Ages consisted of the western half of Rome going into a practice known as feudalism. So for a long period of time, when those Visigoths and Goths and Japhetic tribes took over all the cities and such like that, they destroyed a lot of the centrality of what Rome had and for itself going. So the best way I can explain it and say that is that different tribes, they started doing their own things. And if you know anything about tribal societies that don't necessarily agree on one point, they share kinship bonds as far as their blood, but they go about and operate and do things completely, contradictory to each other sometimes, even to the point to where there's inner fighting and warfare between another within this very same tribes that came in and took over Rome. That's why they were called barbarians, because they didn't have any sort of structure and order for them. So for a good, I want to say maybe like 300 to 400 years, that's what Rome, as far as doing the city of Rome and the western part of the Roman Empire, that's what they were going through. The only thing that really kept the Western Empire intact as far as some level of centrality was the church. The church was the only thing that really kept people in order, and a new order that would come to be soon enough. But the church's involvement with converting though the heathen, which these people were heathens, but it was heathens that converted to believing Christianity, the church helped with doing that, with converting the Visigothic and Gothic tribes to Christianity, to enforce what is known as feudalism, where you could be walking 2 or 3 or 5 miles this way and then find yourself in someone else's lordship or kingship. It was so many things spread out within the Western Roman Empire that was not structured like the brothers in the East and Byzantine and Constantinople. You can continue that.
Otto I, King of Germany, came to the assistance of Pope John XII as the Papal States were invaded by Berenger II of Italy. Otto conquered northern Italy and deposed the Berenger as his own troops abandoned him. The Pope crowned Otto emperor in 962, the first German to become emperor.
Pause
Almost
video.
all successors.
So what you're going to see is a lot of the pattern is eventually, which was said previously, there was a man named Charlemagne. Charlemagne came from the Frankish people, which again was just one of the many Germanic and Japhetic tribes that came in to destroy and conquer the Western European Empire. Charlemagne was the first emperor of all of that area, and he was made such because of the Pope. So remember what I said, that the church still had big influence in controlling the people and converted the peoples at this time in the Western European Empire. So Christianity, since Constantine in 300 AD, still had its effect on both sides of the totality of the Roman Empire, but of course that split that it was currently in. So for the longest time, Western Europe didn't have an emperor like the Eastern side did, and the originally the Romans did. But Charlemagne was made emperor at this time in 800 AD by, basically, I want to explain this too, by the Bishop of Rome. Remember, Rome is a city as well too, where the Vatican is, and in the Italian peninsula. The thing is, what you got to understand is the history of why the Bishop of Rome became known as the Pope. And to briefly touch into that, basically Peter's ministry establishing the church at in Rome was seen as an important thing, because we read in scriptures that Christ said that upon this rock, Peter, you will be given the keys to the kingdom. So Peter's role in the development of the church was really important, and he again started one of the first churches in Rome. The thing is, though, when you have people that are not Israelites and heathens, converting and taking that knowledge, they take it out of whack. So now every bishop and new bishop that comes forth out of the church in Rome, even though it's been corrupted in the period of time, they think that just because they're from Rome, that they're the most, like, they have a successor line to where, like, oh, I'm like the most important, even though Peter's gone, because I'm the Bishop of Rome now, I'm the most important bishop out of all the bishops within the Roman Empire. And that was, again, one of the reasons why the total Roman Empire split between the East and the West, because the Eastern Empire and Constantinople and the Byzantines, those bishops over there, they didn't agree with that. They thought that they were all more so like, co-workers, on a collegiate sense. They didn't believe necessarily that the bishop in Rome was technically, just because he was there, meant to be above the other bishops all throughout the empire. But that's something that the bishops in Rome, as they had more successors and chosen, that's something that they took upon themselves. So they decided to make themselves called the Pope, which we understand now in modern day Catholicism. And that's basically how his role in Catholicism played out back then and today as well too. So that's where the whole notion of this Pope, which has basically the authority and know-how of the Word of God under Christ, that's where that history came in. So that Pope then crowns this man named Charlemagne, emperor of all of Eastern Rome at this time, which was heavily divided already, again because of feudalism. Feudalism didn't have a centralized government. Everyone did what they wanted to do according to what they did. But now all of a sudden, within this feudalism, there's an emperor now. And if you know anything about an emperor is supposed to have that supreme, state control over its states. As we're going to find out, that wasn't really the case with any of the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, but we're going to get into it. You can continue the video.
Be German for the rest of the empire's existence. The early years of the empire's history are dominated by its strained relations with the papacy, a seemingly never-ending power struggle between various emperors and popes over the course of several centuries. They could never agree who was superior, pope or emperor. In the mid-13th century, the empire had an interregnum in which no king was crowned emperor for 67 years. This would actually be the first of 3 interregnums, as another 2 times in the next century and a half would see long stretches of time without a crowned emperor. During the rule of Charles IV, the Golden Bull of 1356 saw major changes to the empire. 7 fixed electors were chosen who would decide the King of Germany, which had become a symbolic title of the elected but not yet coronated emperor. In 1440, with the election of Frederick III as emperor.
So just to further emphasize the way that they were doing about it, what we just heard right now, it eventually got to the point to where emperors were not even necessarily chosen by popes themselves down the line in the history of the Holy Roman Empire, but they had what was called an electoral college. So if you know anything, in which I wish I explained before, but feudalism basically works like this. You have your rulers like kings or dukes or princes, and as well as bishops, you have people like them, and then you have the people under them, or called vassals. And then the vassals, they have basically the commonwealth of the people, which are the peasants and, the servants and the slaves. It's a tiered system. That's how feudalism works. And then what they decided to do is, above the kings and princes and bishops themselves, and as well as dukes, there was supposed to be the emperor, who was supposed to be above all that. But that wasn't anything that was, hereditary or something like that. They had an electoral system. So an electorate of princes and dukes and kings from, again, the many, many different provinces that existed in the Holy Roman Empire at this time. And there was, over a period of time, when it started, there was at least 300 provinces, bigger, some bigger than others, some smaller than others. And between all of that, they had an electoral system to where they basically elected for themselves, this is going to be our emperor, even though all the kings and princes and dukes and even bishops were doing their own thing at the end of the day. Again, this was not as centralized as an empire as the title of their empire, Holy Roman Empire, would make it seem. You can continue the video.
This began 3 straight centuries of emperors from the same royal family, the House of Habsburg from Austria. During the rule of Maximilian I, the Habsburgs greatly expanded their influence through political marriages, acquiring Spain, Burgundy, Bohemia, and Hungary. In 1494, war broke out on the Italian peninsula, primarily between the Habsburgs and France, over various territories and their respective inheritance, most notably Milan, Naples, and Sicily. The war would continue on and off for more than 60 years and effectively ended imperial rule in Italy. In 1517, Martin Luther from Saxony published his 95 Theses, criticising the Roman Catholic Church and many of its practices in what became known as the Protestant Reformation, profoundly changing the course of European history. The Holy Roman Empire became divided as many of the emperor's subjects adopted Lutheranism, creating religious tensions that would last for more than a century, and to an extent, even to this day. It was around this difficult time that probably the most well-known Holy Roman Emperor began his rule, Charles V. Charles was already King of Spain, so Habsburg power reached its peak with a vast array of territories both in and out of the empire. His rule was dominated by religious conflict, first starting with a war against various Lutheran princely estates known as the Schmalkaldic League, who were defeated by Charles and several Catholic princes. The Peace of Augsburg in 1555.
So again, what we're hearing now is that different as the Holy Roman Empire progressed in its time frame, which again was around 800 AD, until really, if you want to know, the ending of it was in the 18th century, which wasn't very long ago from where we're speaking right now, that close to 1,000 year period, um, different municipalities and kingdoms, they began to get, more conglomerated over time, and there began to become less. There was less, dukes and princes and kings over, smaller areas. Eventually, over time, the provinces started to kind of, stick together, and you have what we know today as Spain and Germany and France and some others, Poland, Austria, some of the more bigger recent names that we can recognize today. That's what those states became from their less organized Germanic states. But again, as far as what we understand, Spain isn't necessarily France, and France isn't necessarily Germany. Germany is not necessarily, Burgundy or Poland and such like that. Those were still independently operated states that were supposed to have one emperor, but it didn't work like that. At some point in time, some of these states, whether it be France or Spain or whatever they were before that, they had more power and more finances than others, during whatever time period. And, they struggled. There was still that, for their nations of people, that tribalism existing, as well as too, Israel at the bottom of the scale, Jews and such like that, and Jews that were Christians, as far as the true Christians, were up in the mix and everything too. So all of this with the other nations and such like that, and Israel being in the mix, was happening within the empire during these time periods. You can continue the video.
It gave rulers the right to choose the religion of their estate, Catholicism or Lutheranism, based on the principle of cuius regio eius religio. Shortly afterwards, Charles V abdicated, splitting his inheritance between Spain and Austria. His son Philip II succeeded him in Spain, while his younger brother Ferdinand took over as Emperor and Archduke of Austria, starting the cadet branch of the House of Habsburg. Religious tensions continued as a rebellion started in the Spanish Netherlands, eventually leading to the establishment of the Dutch Republic, with 7 of the 17 provinces seceding from Spain and the Empire. In 1618, the 30 Years' War started in Bohemia with the defenestration of Prague, which is just a fancy way of saying throwing someone out of a window. This began the Bohemian Revolt, which spiraled into a continent-wide power struggle with all major European powers involved. The war ended with the Peace of Westphalia, a massive turning point in the Empire's history. Many view this as the beginning of the end of the Holy Roman Empire. Dutch independence was finally officially recognised, as well as the independence of Switzerland and the territories in northern Italy. The empire became even more decentralised, and the Habsburgs' power began to decline. After the Peace of Westphalia, it becomes less relevant to talk about the history of the Holy Roman Empire as a whole, because what happened in the last 150 years of the empire's existence relates more to the princely estates as individual entities in their own right. There were several very important and impactful wars throughout the late 17th and early 18th century, such as the Franco-Dutch War, the 9 Years' War, and the War of the Spanish Succession. There were always imperial princes on both sides of these conflicts. There was also the Long Turkish War, but this was more related to the Habsburgs and their possessions, given that much of the fighting was over Hungary, which was never part of the empire. The final years of the empire were dominated by the rivalry between Austria and Prussia, by far the two most dominant German powers. Austria had a succession crisis, and the Habsburgs' 3 centuries of ruling the empire came to a temporary end as Charles VII of Bavaria took over in 1745. The two powers clashed in the global conflict, the 7 Years' War, over Silesia, as France and Austria unsuccessfully tried to curb the rising Prussian power. The Holy Roman Empire came to an end at the hands of Napoleon and revolutionary France. Austria was invaded in 1792 and
So yeah, just as we read right now, and we're gonna get into scriptures to kind of do a recap and a rewind. But the end of the Holy Roman Empire, and I say that half-heartedly, because we know that technically that empire still exists in a sense today. But the end of it ended with Napoleon Bonaparte of France and the French Revolution, which all that they really did in was they took out finally the holy part, which was they became secular, which was removed from as far as states, they became removed from the Catholicism in a sense. They basically didn't want the Pope of Rome or the church really to have any more say or any more power within their politics. That's all that was ended from the Holy Roman Empire, because even now today, what you can see in modern day, what do they have? They have the European Union, which is, basically operates the same in the same way, decentralized states doing their own thing, but sharing this history, and then still with prestigious kind of honor, recognizing places like Vatican City and the Pope and such like that. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna get this understanding as far as what the scriptures say, like where do the scriptures point this time period out in the scriptures, and we're gonna elaborate on that too with some of the history that was said and that can still be said. So we're gonna get to the book of Revelations first, chapter 13, and then bear with me for me to get there. And we're gonna dig in this. We're gonna dig in this, and we're gonna jump in and out of that. So, Revelations. Matter of fact, let's start with this just for context. Let's get to the book of Revelations, chapter 12, and we're going to start at verse 1, and we're going to skip around before we get to 13.
This is the book of Revelation, chapter 12, and verse 1. And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars.
And that woman is Israel. That is, dealing with the nation of Israel. You can continue.
Verse 2. And she being with child cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head.
Now that's dealing with, so Revelation is being written in similitudes. That woman giving birth, as far as Israel, that birth is supposed to be given to was Christ. And we all know that Christ was born during what captivity? The Roman captivity. So this red dragon with the horns, with the 7 heads and the 10 horns, that's actually Rome at the time before Christianity was accepted. That's Rome during that time. So you can continue from there.
Verse 4. And his tail drew the third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born.
So we should all know that history in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John about Herod, and even specifically Herod trying to kill Christ, because it was told to him that he would be the king of all kings. So that history is already confirmed. So again, we're dealing with right now at this point in time in Revelations, the beginning of the Roman persecution of Israel, and Christ as well too. So let's jump down. Let's jump down to let's see. Let's jump down to verse 7 in that chapter.
Verse 7. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, the old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accuseth them before our God day and night.
Mm-hmm.
Verse 11, And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they loved not their lives unto the death.
So this is dealing with the spread of Christ's teachings and repentance and waking back Israel all throughout the Roman Empire. It's talking about basically up until the point of 300 AD, when Constantine finally brought Christianity to Rome. Is dealing with that build-up and time period. That's what we're going through within these scriptures right here and right now. So Rome is, failing in that sense. But we're going to see it didn't really fail for too long as far as with the present time we're dealing right now. Continue on with that verse.
Verse 12, Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the seal, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he had but a short time. And when the dragon saw that he was cast unto the earth, he persecuted the woman which brought forth the man-child.
So again, the persecution of Christians, throughout Rome. Being a Christian was not at that time, at that time, an easy thing to do. A lot of the patriarchs and leaders were getting put to death, for teaching this to Israelites, all throughout that kingdom. You can continue.
Verse 14, And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, for the face of the serpent. So, from the face of the serpent.
And that's again dealing with Christ warned those that who kept his discipleship and commandment, when he said, look, when you see Jerusalem encompassed by all the armies and such like that, he said leave. And that's dealing with those that were privy to that. They did leave. So the ones that left, they were spared to keep the traditions that Christ taught and to pass those out. So that was that sheltering and getting away from the persecution of Rome or the beast at this point in time. So now we're leading into we're gonna get into the Holy Roman Empire in specific and jump to verse 17.
Verse 17, And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which kept the commandments of the Most High, and have the testimony of Yahushua.
Israel, all throughout wherever they may be within the Roman kingdom, that was what it was like before Christianity, so to speak, came to take over Roman religion. Now we get to chapter 13 and verse 1.
This is the book of Revelation, chapter 13 and verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy.
So this beast being a kingdom and likeness of the dragon that we read about that had similar fashions. We're going to get the differences between the two right now. Continue.
Verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, and his seat, and great authority.
So right now we have 2 separate entities working together: the dragon and then the beast. What did we just review about in the lesson? We read that when the Holy Roman Empire began, it was because the Pope made Charlemagne the fifth, and as well as many popes and many emperors that came after that, the popes was the one that gave power unto the new Roman Empire, the holy so-called Roman Empire of the East, of the eastern half of the fall of Rome. So we read right now through chapter 12 that, when the dragon was cast down into the earth, that was the fall of the Eastern Roman Empire, but still with grounds to want to destroy Israel. And now at this point, the empire has resuscitated because of the power of the dragon, which is the liar, the deceiver, the Christian church at that time, headed by the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, giving that seat of authority back to all the emperors that came from that time, whether the emperor himself or the many municipalities and kings and princes that were around in Eastern Europe and Eastern Rome at that time. That's what that's dealing between the relationship between the beast and the dragon. You can continue.
Verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all of the world wondered after the beast.
The Holy Roman Empire coming up again from Rome's initial destruction. That's what it was. When you thought that Rome was destroyed through Visigothic invasions and the splitting of the church and stuff like that, Rome was resuscitated again because of the emperors that the Pope gave power to, which we read about in the Holy Roman Empire's history. That's what that's dealing with at this time frame. You can continue.
Verse 4, and they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given into him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months.
So a lot of those blasphemies, if you can understand what even modern day Christianity or Catholicism really is like, it has nothing to do with what thus saith the Lord in the Bible. A lot of the history with Christianity within the Roman Empire and Catholicism itself is incorporating pagan beliefs painted with biblical images and biblical characters. That's all that Catholicism and Christianity, as far as it's not being for Israelites, like when other nations, when they have been practicing it, that's what it's turned into, and Catholicism in particular. And that's why it's understood that you should know that the Pope and such, or that false prophet, was given the animal of the dragon, which is a serpent, because the serpent is cunning. So it comes in the guise, in the face of, oh, this is Christianity. But really, when you study precept upon precept in the law, Christianity of today and Catholicism of today and back then, it had nothing to do with what Christ actually came to teach. So it was false. That's the Synagogue of Satan, which we read about. Let's bring that out in Revelations. Those that say that they're of Christ but are not, and that's in 2 and 9. Yeah, Revelations 2 and 9.
It's the book of Revelation, chapter 2, verse 9. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan.
That's dealing completely with when we're dealing with the papacy and the Pope of the Catholic Church, and all that follow under him. That is that red dragon and that beast that we're talking about, and even Esau more so in particular, and everyone else under him. So we can continue, I believe, on verse 7 in chapter 13.
Verse 7, Revelation 13, verse 7. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations.
Catholicism being that universal, that's what it means, and thus showing itself right there, and even to the point of Christians persecuting Jewish people themselves. So again, they've been making war with us as with our forefathers, and even us today as the Jews, the real Hebrews, the real Israelites. Thus saith the Lord. Continue.
Verse 8, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints.
That's what we keep. And we could read these last two verses just to give some foresight, and then get to some other scriptures dealing with the Holy Roman Empire in the scriptures.
Verse 11, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exercised all the power of the first beast before him, and caused the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed.
And that's dealing with the construction of the new world, and America in particular, specifically, being that sprang from that first beast that was once dead but then relived again. And this part's just talking about America, but that's for another lesson. Let's get to dealing more with this beast, which is Rome. Today, let's get to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 7, and we're gonna get the verse right now as we get to it ourselves. Daniel chapter 7, and we'll just read from all the beasts. Chapter 2.
Verse 2.
Verse 2. Excuse me, verse 2.
This is the book of Daniel, chapter 7 and verse 2. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven strove upon the great sea, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another.
So it's going to go into, if you guys know anything about the prophecy of Daniel, the 4 different empires that would come to rule the known earth in antiquity up until this point in time. So the first beast being the first beast being Babylon, the second beast being the Persians and the Medes, the third beast being the Grecians, and then the fourth beast, which is what we're focusing on in this lesson, which is Rome and its many incarnations since then and from then. You can get to verse 7.
Verse 7. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and mouth speaking great things.
And that's getting into the many details of like the rebirths of the Roman Empire, as we've seen it from back then to this day, from the split between the Byzantine side and the Holy Roman Empire side being reconstructed, and even to America's foundations being made today. That's all what was being explained, jam-packed in those scriptures right there. And I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm still getting the understanding myself, but I do know that that's the time period and the frame of time that we're dealing with this prophecy. especially when you read down to verse 9, which is dealing with the Ancient of Days and the Most High coming upon the earth and making all that go away, and then having his eternal kingdom reign from there. So it all fits within the time frame. But we're going to jump into right now into the book of Second Esdras, just to give you 3 books of prophecies dealing with this time frame and dealing with the Rome and the Holy Roman Empire in particular. So we're going to get to Second Esdras chapter 11, and we're going to read the prophecies with that and elaborate on the ones that we have in our understanding in there tonight as well too. So again, Second Esdras chapter 11, and we can start from verse 1.
There's a book of Second Esdras chapter 11 verse 1. Then saw I a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. And I saw, and behold, she spread her wings over all the earth, and all the winds of the air blew on her, and were gathered together. And I beheld, and out of her feathers there grew other contrary feathers, and they came little feathers and small. But her heads were at rest. The head in the midst was greater than the other, yet rested it with the residue.
So we get the first beginnings and intros of this beast taking on the form of an eagle throughout the beginnings of this chapter, and then many of the descriptions that come along with it, which is the feathers and such in the body and the 3 heads that it has. So we can continue reading on.
Verse 5. Moreover, I beheld, and lo, the eagle flew with her feathers, and ran upon the earth, and over them that dwelt therein. And I saw that all things under heaven were subject unto her, and no man spake against her, no, not one creature upon earth. And I beheld, and lo, the eagle rose upon her talons, and spake to her feathers, saying, Watch not all at once. Sleep every one in his own place, and watch by course, but let the heads be preserved for the last. And I beheld, and lo, the voice went not out of her heads, but from the midst of her body. And I numbered her contrary feathers, and behold, there were 8 of them. And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose 1 feather, and reigned over all the earth.
So these are dealing with the feathers, which we're going to get the explanation in within this chapter itself, and then the next chapter is dealing with the many kings and powers, like we were dealing and saying with how Rome was operating, all the people under essentially, the emperor itself, all the many, governors and princes and such like that. That's what all these different feathers, ruling the different parts of wherever they're at of the earth, but still coming from this beast. That's what the details of this is getting into, which runs parallel to what we read in Revelations and Daniel, just expounded. And we're gonna get that too. Keep reading on, and we're gonna jump around a little bit.
Verse 13. And so it was that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more. So the next following stood up and reigned, and had a great time. And it happened that when it rained, the end of it came also, like at the first, so that it appeared no more. Then came there a voice unto it, and said, Hear thou that hast borne rule over the earth so long, this I say unto thee, before thou beginnest to appear no more. There shall none after thee attain unto thy time, neither unto the half thereof. Then arose the third, and reigned as the other before, and it appeared no more also. So went it with all the residue one after another, and that every one reigned, and then appeared no more.
So let's jump down to verse 36, because for a good portion of the rest of this chapter is going to get into the doings of these feathers that are upon this beast, which is represented as an eagle, So we're going to jump into verse 36, and we're going to get some more explanation right from the scriptures about what these feathers and the bodies and the heads actually represent according to thus saith the Lord.
Verse 36, Then I heard a voice which said unto me, Look before thee, and consider the thing that thou seest. And I beheld, and lo, as if it were a roaring lion chased out of the wood. And I saw that he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle, and said, Hear thou, I will talk with thee, and the highest shall say unto thee.
So this is another similitude of another beast, contrary or going against the beast of the eagle that we saw brought out in the beginning. This is a lion now that's coming and basically standing against this beast. And this is what this lion is saying.
Verse 39, Art not thou it that remainest of the four beasts, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times might come through them?
So what did we just read about in Daniel about the four beasts? And this lion is now saying, you're the remainest of the fourth beast. So this is, again, lining up. This is that fourth beast that we read about in Daniel, just to give that confirmation, because all these prophecies and revelations, they coincide, because there's no private interpretation of the scriptures. Everything works in tandem. Continue that.
Verse 40, And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. For the earth hast thou not judged with truth, for thou hast afflicted the meek, thou hast hurt the peaceable, thou hast loved liars, and destroyed the dwellings of them that brought forth fruit, and hast cast down the walls of such that did thee no harm. Therefore in thy wrongful dealings come up unto the highest, and thy pride unto the mighty. The highest also had looked upon the proud times, and behold, they are ended, and his abominations are fulfilled.
What we're experiencing right now in this 21st century, as we see the falling of the new Roman Empire, or the new Roman Empire dealing with America. We're in the midst of that right now. Continue.
And therefore appear no more, thou eagle, nor thy horrible wings, nor thy wicked feathers, nor thy malicious heads, nor thy hurtful claws, nor all thy vain body, that all the earth may be refreshed, and may return, being delivered from thy violence, and that she may hope for the judgment and mercy of him that made her. Chapter 12, verse 1. And it came to pass, while the lion spake these words unto the eagle, I saw, and behold, the head of that remaineth, and the four wings appeared no more. And the two went unto it, and set themselves up to reign, and their kingdom was small, and full of uproar. And I saw, and behold, there appeared no more, and the whole body of the eagle was burnt, so that the earth was in great fear. Then awaked I out of trouble in trance of my mind, and from great fear I said unto my spirit, Lo, this hast thou done unto me, in that thou searchest out thy ways of the highest. Lo, yet I am weary in my mind, and very weak in my spirit, and little strength is there in me, for the great fear wherewith I was affrighted this night. Therefore I will now beseech the highest, that he will comfort me unto the end. And I said, Lo, that bearest rule, if I have found grace before thy sight, and if I am justified with thee before many others, and if my prayer indeed be come up before thy face, comfort me then, and show me thy servant the interpretation and plain difference of this fearful vision.
So Ezra's basically, through all that, he finishes the vision that he was shown with the eagle and the many details with the feathers and the lion coming about, which again you can read full details for yourselves in this chapter, Ezra's chapter 11. Ezra comes out of that and he begins to ask the Lord, the Most High, to give him understanding of what it is that he's seen, so that he have some sort of peace and comfort. So now we're gonna get into that, as far as again that understanding dealing with the Holy Roman Empire and picking out those pieces. So let's jump to verse 11.
Verse 11. The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel.
So that fourth beast, again, already saying before previously it was the fourth, and now confirming, yeah, that's that fourth beast that we talked about in Daniel, even ourselves, earlier. So let's skip to let's skip to verse 17.
Verse 17. As for the voice which thou heardest speak, and thou sawest not to go out from the heads, but from the midst of the body thereof, this is the interpretation, that after the time of the kingdom there shall rise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless it shall not then fall, but shall be restored again to his beginning.
And that's dealing again with the fall of the Roman Empire, and then it's rebuilding into the Holy Roman Empire. That's what's dealing with that period of time, as well as too with America coming about in the later future. That's what this prophecy is dealing with. You can continue down.
Verse 19. And whereas thou sawest the eighth small under feathers sticking to her wings, this is the interpretation, that in him there shall arise 8 kings, whose time shall be but small, and their years swift. And 2 of them shall perish, the middle time approaching, for shall be kept until the end begin to approach. But 2 shall be kept unto the end. And whereas thou sawest the 3 heads resting, this is the interpretation.
So we're gonna stop it right there. This prophecy is definitely open and available for everyone to read it, but you do definitely have to know a lot of your history as far as the major players that dealt within the Roman kingdom from its inception all the way to all the way to basically becoming America today. And that's everything between with the European Union, the Holy Roman Empire, the Byzantine aspect of it. Even you want to know information about the Umayyad Empire with the Arabs and Islam. Those are all things you want to know about as far as getting the nitty-gritty details of this particular prophecy in 2nd Esdras, because there's a lot of similitude that was given, that is a similitude of real world history events that happened already. That's what thus saith the Lord deals with when we're dealing with these prophecies. But again, you have to be on point and know a lot of your historical events that have came to pass. And when you get into it enough, you can start to see all these similitudes, like with all the feathers that were supposed to be representative of kings dealing with Rome and such like that. Europe, it'll start to make more sense. And I'm gonna leave it like as that, because of course, as we do history, there's a lot more history that I could be reading into with that as well too. So as far as dealing with the scriptures, that's what we have dealing with Rome at this time in the Holy Roman Empire. So again, main points you guys do want to just remember from this lesson is that from the Holy Roman Empire, the Pope was established, which was supposed to just be a bishop, one of many bishops of many churches within the formerly established Roman Empire. That's where he got his self-proclaimed power from, and as well as knowing that a lot of the states, as far as the states within the empire, were very independent and decentralized, but still reported really at the end of the day to the Pope himself, and the Pope giving that power to whoever was the emperor at that time, and the states, getting their blessings, but knowing that these states like Spain and France were really on their own tip, doing their own thing for close to 1,000 years, while its reign happened in this world during that time. So with that, I think that's a decent amount that we can cover with tonight's world history lesson on the Holy Roman Empire. We hope you enjoyed it, and we hope that you stay tuned as we dig in a little bit more deeper on some of the details that we have coming up in our next lessons with that. And with that, I do want to say shalom.
Shalom.